Good afternoon, everyone. So today, the confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett were kicked off, and the Democrats leveled pretty much unanimously the same 3 lines of attack on a looping repeat. Every single time another Democrat spoke, they would basically regurgitate what the previous Democrat said, and all of their attacks followed these 3 different lines. So number 1 is that this confirmation hearing defies all past precedent, that during an election year, for the president to nominate a Supreme Court justice defies all past precedent. And then number 2, to have the Senate vote to confirm a Supreme Court nomination in an election year just defies all past precedent. So let's take a look. What actually is the past precedent? So in an election year, there has been 29 instances where there is a vacancy in the Supreme Court. In all 29 of those cases, the president nominated a Supreme Court justice. So that is just absolute nonsense. The notion that somehow Donald Trump nominating a Supreme Court justice during an election year is not backed up by past precedent is absolute nonsense. In all 29 times, every single time, the president nominated a Supreme Court justice. Now let's get on to part 2, the confirmation, the Senate holding confirmation hearings. Okay, so in those 29 instances where the president, which every single time, nominated a Supreme Court justice, in 19 of those instances, the president and the Senate were of the same party. In 17 out of those 19 times, the Senate voted to confirm the Supreme Court justice. So the precedent here is pretty clear. If the Senate and the president are of the same party, most likely, almost always, the Senate will confirm the Supreme Court justice. Now let's look at the other 10, right? So 19 out of the 29, Senate, president, same party. So now the other 10, Senate, president of different party. So out of those 10 times where the Senate was of a different party than the president, only one of those times was the Supreme Court nomination confirmed. So the precedent is pretty simple. Every single time, the president has always appointed a Supreme Court justice. If the Senate is of the same party as the presidency, the Supreme Court justice almost always gets nominated. If it's of a different party than the president, then the Supreme Court justice almost always does not get voted in. It's that simple. Moving on to line of attack number 2 by the Democrats. This was that Amy Coney Barrett is going to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act, stripping millions of Americans of pre-existing conditions amidst a global pandemic. And the Democrats kept repeating this on looping repeat. They would tell these heart-throbbing, sad anecdotes about someone that they knew that has pre-existing conditions that could barely get by, and that the Affordable Health Care Act, which covered people with pre-existing conditions, essentially saved their life. And Amy Coney Barrett is seeking to remove the Affordable Health Care Act, which in turn will strip people of pre-existing conditions. So let's break this down. Part 1. Is Amy Coney Barrett for repealing the Affordable Health Care Act? Yes, she is. But just wait a second. Part 2. Does that mean that people will be stripped of pre-existing conditions? No, it does not. You can replace the Affordable Health Care Act and not strip people of pre-existing conditions. How do we know this? Well, the president, Donald Trump, who has proposed a replacement for Obamacare, for the Affordable Health Care Act, ever since he took office, has been consistent on his message that whatever health care plan he uses to replace the Affordable Health Care Act will cover people with pre-existing conditions. Donald Trump has had mixed messages on many things. However, this is not one of them. Every single time Donald Trump has been asked about people with pre-existing conditions, he unequivocally states that they will be covered in whatever health care plan he chooses to replace the Affordable Health Care Act. Nonetheless, here is Cory Booker and Kamala Harris trying to strike fear in the hearts of Americans by lying and saying that Amy Coney Barrett is going to strip millions of people with pre-existing conditions.
23 million Americans could lose their health insurance altogether If they succeed, they will eliminate protections for 135 million Americans with pre-existing conditions like diabetes and asthma, heart disease, or cancer.
It looks like 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions, from cancer survivors to people with disabilities, being charged more or denied coverage completely. It looks like 20 million Americans losing their access to potentially life-saving care in the middle of a pandemic that's already killed over 214,000 Americans. In New Jersey, we've lost over 16,000 people to COVID-19. 595,000 people would lose their coverage without the ACA. For millions of Americans, a future without the ACA looks like being forced to sell your house if you can't afford your health care. It looks like not having access to a doctor when you're sick. It looks like having to choose between paying for groceries and paying for medicine.
I find it hilarious that Cory Booker wants to bring up the death toll in New Jersey when they are one of the states, just like Andrew Cuomo's state of New York, that was shipping elderly back to nursing homes. And secondly, last time I checked, they have the highest per capita death rate in the United States. In New Jersey, like New York, is under Democratic leadership. So if I were Cory Booker, I wouldn't want to do anything to bring light to the COVID failures of New York and in particular New Jersey. And then secondly, this whole fear-mongering that the Democrats are engaging in, like Cory Booker, saying that people are going to have to choose between buying groceries and affording health care, and they might lose their homes because they're not going to be able to afford the health care for their pre-existing conditions, is just absolute nonsense. While Donald Trump has had mixed messages on many different things in terms of pre-existing conditions, Donald Trump has unequivocally stated over 20 times since taking office that he will not strip people of pre-existing conditions. There has been no mixed messaging at all from Donald Trump in terms of whether or not he will strip people of pre-existing conditions. He's been very, very clear about this. He has unequivocally stated over 20 times since taking office that he will not do this. In addition to that, he recently signed an executive order stating that he will not strip people of pre-existing conditions.
The action I'm taking today includes the first ever executive order to affirm it is the official policy of the United States government to protect patients with pre-existing conditions. So we're making that official. We're putting it down in a stamp because our opponents, the Democrats, like to constantly talk about it, and yet pre-existing conditions are much safer with us than they are with them, and now we have it affirmed. This is affirmed, signed, and done, so we can put that to rest. They'll say it anyway because it's disinformation.
So just to summarize everything up until this point, we have lie number one by the Democrats that this confirmation hearing and the president's nomination of Amy Coney Barrett during an election year defies all past precedent. We know that is absolute bogus. That's absolute nonsense. That's completely debunked. And then number two, this idea that somehow if Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed and she strips the Affordable Health Care Act down and replaces it with something else, that it will not include provisions to protect people with pre-existing conditions, is fear-mongering. It's absolute nonsense. It's absolute lies. And then lastly, the third line of attack by Democrats is that Amy Coney Barrett is going to repeal Roe versus Wade. This is absolute nonsense as well. Amy Coney Barrett has made it clear that there is past precedent on this, and that it is a settled case. It has made zero indication at all that she intends to overturn Roe v. Wade. In my next video, I'm going to discuss how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have continued to avoid questions on whether or not they support packing the courts if somehow they end up getting into office this November. And this is something that really deserves lots of attention because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been avoiding this question for weeks. And now even CNN's Jake Tapper is calling them out on their ridiculous avoidance of this question and how important of a question this is and why the voters deserve to know whether or not Joe Biden and Kamala Harris plan on packing the courts. That's going to be my next segment, so look out for that. That's my video. Hope you like it. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe, and I will see you all next time.